Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Hobby Cheating Q&A live. So, what are we doing today? Well, today we are going to be answering all of your hobby cheating, hobby-oriented questions live. We're going to be, you're going to pop some questions into the comments. I'm going to do my best to answer them in real time. So the idea here is to basically, if there are things that I haven't gotten to yet in hobby cheating videos or just general stuff that you want to know or you've had challenging you in your hobby journey, now's the time. So you can ask your questions and we can see if I can give answers. I will do my absolute best. I will openly admit I don't know everything, but I certainly hope that I've built up enough to answer a fair amount of questions and share what I know. So we're going to be here for about the next hour or something like that. And we're going to do basically as many questions as we can in that time. So if you want, start popping them in the comments now and we'll go from there. Okay. So in the interim, while I'm sort of waiting on the questions to start rolling in, I will just kind of talk about what I'm working on here before I head off for the holidays. I have to leave today to go back spend a couple days with family, which is, I don't know, unfortunate, I guess, to a degree, because I think I'd probably enjoy just sitting here painting. For that would be a great Christmas present to me, but that's just not how it works. So, what I'm working on is some Necromunda. I'm just working on finishing up this girl right here. She doesn't have that much farther to go. She's almost done. 3 out of the 5 I'm doing for this particular little unit of House Escher. And that's a lot of fun. I'm greatly enjoying this. As you can see, we're going for a very bright color scheme. It probably doesn't come through very well because the camera doesn't show color, but there's pink and green and blue, and they're all very bright, crazy colors. So first off, go ahead and pop in those questions. Start asking them whatever you want to know, any question you've got, anything like that. And if it's too big for me to answer here, it's also good because I'll just mark it down as a future hobby cheating video and I'll do a full video of it. So there you go. In celebration of the holidays, a little hobby cheating live. Okay. So we'll jump right in. And first off, Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays or Happy Hanukkah or whatever you happen to be celebrating to everybody watching, or in that now or in the future. All right, so let's answer some questions. Scott R says, how much can you get done with an airbrush? I'm doing base coats and a few fades. What would be next? The answer is you can get done with an airbrush as much as you want to, as you're willing to spend the time doing. On very small models, something like this girl, where everything is its own little distinct color, the answer is, unless you want to use a lot of like liquid mask or tape stuff off, not as much. If you're talking about bigger models, monsters and things that are sort of giant sized, a lot. But there's lots of different ways to use your airbrush. What would be next, if you're asking that question, would be working on setting your volumes and your initial color palettes in some different ways. Using it to set some pre-shading and stuff like that, even beyond what you might be doing with just like sort of basic zenithal. If you have something like a 0.2 millimeter needle and you're very accurate with your trigger finger, you can also use it to smooth out final blends on specific areas. If you're very careful, because you're doing that over a painted model. Sergio Calvo, the person who won Crystal Brush last year, that's one of his tricks, is one of his last steps is with an airbrush. Now he is a surgeon with that airbrush, because he's putting that to a highly painted model, but, that can also be a great trick. The application of inks, the use of inks to smooth out the look of it being airbrushed, is my particular favorite trick. Like after you've done sort of a large fade, the problem is airbrush things look airbrushed. Inks can help remove that airbrushed look. So there you go. That's my answer. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so Mikarovic says, I've converted a whole bunch of flagellants to look like Spell Queller the Spell Queller from MTG for a Nighthaunt's army. How would you replicate the paint scheme in the art? Oh boy, I do not remember what the Spell Queller art looks like off the top of my head. So give me a moment. I'll look that up here. Spell Queller. Oh, it's like a purple ghosty thing. Okay. Yeah, so purple ghost is I think what we're aiming at there. I would say the same thing as what you would normally do with your ghosts. So if I was going to do it from scratch, I would Zenithal as normal, but in between the gray and white step, I would apply a full purple ink, something like a Vallejo Game Ink Purple, to set some really dark shades. Then I would apply my white. Then I would, like if I'm doing this the quick way for ghosts or something, then I would probably do an ink wash, a very thin ink glaze of purple over the whole thing, over the white to tint that again. And then I would go back in with just a slightly purple white and pick out the highlights. That's how I'd go monochromatic purple tone. Hopefully that's answering what you're looking for. I think you could do like ghosts are one of those things you can do almost all of with an airbrush because you don't have to have a lot of detail. Okay. Good morning from snowy Alberta, Canada. Hello in snowy Alberta, Canada. It's snowing right here now too. Okay. What's your advice on painting a horde army? This is from Paul Conti to an above tabletop standard without sinking huge amounts of time into it. When was the last time you actually took on a high model count project? A while ago. I don't like high model count projects. Now, if we're talking about above tabletop standard, well, that's a very squidgy definition. Okay. One person's above tabletop is another person's tabletop, and so on and so forth, right? Now, but the short answer to it is this. We're talking about high model count army. Then here are your secrets to getting high quality. One, good zenithal base coating, because that does most of the work for you. Use things like sketch style undershading to your advantage. Don't paint over black or monocolor. Like that is number one, because you are wasting a ton of time. Like if you want to talk about how to get better, faster with a high number of models, you should be zenithal priming. You should restrict your color palette down to 2 to 3 very strong colors, and those should be the dominant, and you should force yourself to work in those and only those. You should use tricks like very soft dry brushing and glazing over the top wherever possible, to basically smooth, to create high amounts of contrast, but then smooth them out and not have the paint job look rough. You should identify and focus on things like faces. So faces, bases, banners, and shields. That's what people look at. Okay. Like when you look at a horde army, when you look at 30, 40 models in a pack, you don't notice anything else but faces, bases, banners, and shields. Make those all look good. Spend your time there. If the rest of the model itself is basically tabletop, but faces, bases, banners, and shields all look really good and have a lot of detail, that's what people will notice. And they will look above tabletop standard. So that's my best advice. There's probably a lot more, like, I mean, again, keeping to a limited paint palette, using as many colors as you can, working with a wet palette so your paint's always ready to go. All these things are little time savers that add up, and help you achieve higher tabletop quality faster. Okay. Carrion Unthol, how do you get a Damascus steel effect on weapons or armor? I don't know, because I don't know what that means. I mean, I know what Damascus steel is. It's supposedly the sharpest steel ever created because of the nature of the iron ore that it was farmed from. Let's see. Oh, okay. Interesting. So it has this like little almost marbled quality to it. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Huh. Wow, that's a tricky one. You're gonna have to give me a minute to think about that one, because that is a heck of a pattern. It's like an extremely, so Damascus steel in the images that I just saw looked like an extremely complicated sort of circular-ish marbling pattern. You're gonna have to let me think about that one. That's pretty tricky. I'm trying to think of a way to answer that question without saying a ton of freehand. That might be the answer, a ton of freehand, but I'll think about it. Okay, Mateo, if you use satin or matte varnish over a metallic plus ghost tint, will it still look okay? I don't varnish over metallics because it will kill the proper sheen. My advice would be do your metallics absolutely last and varnish in between applying all of your matte paints, then varnish, then do your metallics. I don't varnish over metallics. If you're going to, and you can mask it off, Vallejo metal varnish will preserve most of the sheen, would be my best advice if you really feel it's necessary. But depending on how much your models are handled, I mean, you don't really need to varnish metal paint. It's actually pretty tough because it is metal flakes. So there you go. Okay. What is your opinion on painting eyes on 28 millimeter? I watched a video recently from another high class painter who said it's better not to paint them. What led you to think about it? I always paint eyes. I think you should always paint eyes, always and every time, unless they're so absolutely impossible to paint that you can't do it. I don't buy that. I'm not to go against, I don't know who said that or whatever. And they, I get it. I understand it. It's a challenge. But my answer would be use a very simple, like these girls have unbelievably tiny eyes, but I'm still doing them. Now, this is a competition piece, right? So I couldn't not paint eyes on something for competition. That being said, like if there's really no space, if there's a bunch of people like squinting like this, like you can't see my eyes right now, right? There's no definition in my eye other than the dark line. So if you literally have a bunch of models where they're doing this, sure, don't paint the eyes. But if they're like this, you're going to see something. And my basic advice would be use a simpler technique, like get a good flowing, make sure the ring around the eye is dark, get a good flowing light gray paint and go and make a little line and then take a black dot and force it into one of the corners. So the figure is either looking like this or like this, right? All the way to one side or the other. And that's good enough. I don't think you should go much farther than that on 28 millimeter unless they have sort of bigger eyes. Like as to your next comment was sort of, you always try to paint him, but you're not happy with the result. Yeah. Because it's something that you only really like after you've practiced and practiced and practiced and figure out how to get your paint flowing. My best advice is Liquitex Flow Aid. Get yourself some Flow Aid. Doesn't have to be Liquitex, but get yourself some Flow Aid because you need paint that is going to wick in an extremely controlled fashion off of the sharpest tip of the brush to get a good eye. Okay. Like it has to be, if you have to, so here's what I mean by flowing. Something you don't think about as a newer painter, but it's one of the most critical things that I think about a lot. How much pressure do I have to apply from the brush to what I'm painting to make the paint go to the model? When you're doing eyes, it needs to be you touch and the paint goes there, but doesn't flow out of control. That means you have to strike this like magical balance of flow, but not too much in the brush. So it's about getting it flowing really well, wicking all the rest off onto like a paper towel, getting it flowing and push toward the tip on the back of your thumb, and then just touching it perfectly. It's a tough challenge, man. It still is. I struggled with the eyes on this girl just today, and it took back and forth some work. I mean, like it's never going to get easy, but you'll get happier. That's my short answer. Okay. Now that being said, do you have to? No. I mean, like I said, if they're closed or they're very, very tiny, just don't paint them. Like you can get away with it, but a model looks much different when you actually call out the eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul is a statement for a reason. We look at eyes. Humans are trained to look at eyes. When we look at something that doesn't have eyes, we notice it looks off subconsciously, even if it's a tiny plastic person. So, I would say it's worth challenging yourself and pushing yourself, but don't kill yourself. If you're going to have a bad time doing it, it's okay to skip it. Painting should make you happy, not torture you. Okay. Let's see. John J. Think you could release a quick and dirty recommendation list of the best undercoat colors for the various colors, i.e. flesh, gold, various metallic, yellows, whites, etc. Well, for metal paint, I don't worry about undercoat because I use Vallejo metal color. So there is no undercoating because this covers 100%. It doesn't matter what you put under this. It's irrelevant. You could put this over anything and it will give you perfect coverage. So use Vallejo metal color because it's the best metal paint on the market. Everything else is trash when it comes to steel. I don't have the, like, I've talked about this a lot. There you go. For flesh, depends on what you're going for, but in general, I mean, I don't do an incredible amount of undershading on flesh tone. I would say my undershade for flesh tone is a mid-tone flesh tone. I generally, for the base of flesh, that is the thing I will always airbrush on. So like, here is a girl that I haven't painted yet for my army for the Necromunda. You can see the flesh is the only thing airbrush base coated on because I want to start from a nice mid-tone of that, and then I glaze up and down from there. When it comes to like purples, greens, and blues, generally black to white will do you fine, like that kind of zenithal. When you're talking about reds, oranges, and yellows, you should be into the warm white, ivory, browns, rust colors, things like that. You want something that has warmth in it. So generally undercoat it with what it needs. If it's a cold color like blues, greens, and some purples, then you want that black to white. If it's a warm color, you want something like an ivory or something like that. You know, for gold, people talk about using brown underneath. That's only necessary if you're using a gold paint that isn't, its pigment is too big that doesn't settle evenly. If you're using like, if you use like Vallejo liquid gold or, you know, Vallejo metal color, so alcohol based, acrylic based, both of these cover 100%. It doesn't matter, again, what you undershade in. You can put it over anything. Yellow is the one, like yellow and other bright colors like that. Never, ever, ever, never, 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 never over black. Never. Have I said it enough? Okay. Stop painting over black. Stop wasting your life. You're throwing it down the drain for no reason. Yellow and bright orange should go over like a flesh tone, or which is a great base, by the way, to work from. So if you're doing an airbrush base or something like that with your flesh anyways, and you know something's going to be yellow or orange, hit that too, because it's a beautiful base for yellows and oranges. Okay. Okay. Can you talk about the matte finishes of different paints? Sure. So scale color is the most matte finish. I think it reflects basically nothing. Watercolors is pretty close behind with a pretty darn matte finish. In my experience, Vallejo tends to have a somewhat satin finish. Same with Games Workshop. That is to say, especially here's the real trick. This varies a lot. Like, answering this is tough because it varies a lot depending on how you thin it, and that has to do with pigment density. So if a paint has a low pigment density, like Citadel's paints, what happens is the more you thin it, the glossier it gets, because the nature of the hexagonal molecules of the medium means that a little bit of the paint stops getting trapped in each little hexagon and it gets spread out. And so all you have is the medium, and medium by itself is naturally glossy. Okay. So Vallejo is a little better, but it's almost satin on its own. P3 is a little satiny, but it's mostly matte. Depends that I found more variance with them in the color range. Reaper is pretty close to matte. Again, it depends on the colors. I like Reaper paints a lot. I think they look very nice. Sometimes a little bit of a satin finish can actually be useful depending on what you're trying to achieve. It's more about just knowing what it's going to do and then using that to your advantage, but that takes just like a lot of experimentation. If you want like dead matte, then I mean, scale color or watercolors are your answers. They are the dead matte, and they're very high pigment density, so you can thin them just with water and still achieve an extremely matte finish. There you go. That's the basic answer. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let's see. You mentioned in your month end submit that the Mega Boss base looked like an oil painting and it kind of didn't fit with the rest of the model. Fair comment. I've started basing my army like that already, though. What do you think would help? Maybe pulling colors into the base. Yeah, I mean, just part of the problem. So this is a very specific question, but that's fine. I do happen to remember, Robert, what I was talking about. Your base was very Van Gogh. It was very squidgy. The colors were flowing into each other. My answer would be definition. Like, cut out some specific things. The model is well defined. Have the base well defined. Have your basing elements be clearly separated from each other. It's just general, good thing in general. Let's see. Okay. Yes or no, green stuff rollers to help build some 25 millimeter bases that kind of look like stone paths in grass, such as Strider and Hobbits near Weathertop. Yeah, sure. If you're going to do that, the fun way to do that is to make a big chunk of like milliput or something like that. Do the roller, let it dry, crack it and break it up, and then put those stones onto bases that then have mud and grass in between. Don't roll the whole base, basically, right? Like make yourself flagstones and then put them onto the other base. Yeah, sure. It's an awesome idea. I'm generally not a fan of just rolling the whole base, of just like you put a piece of green stuff on the base, you roll the whole base. I'm generally less of a fan of that because I don't know where that model is standing then. I guess if they're like, depending on what it is, maybe, but I'm more a fan of like having some kind of something that is in some way broken up on the base rather than one uniform thing or texture. I think in general, a base looks better when it has some kind of different elements going on. You know, just in general, if somebody's standing on a completely uniform surface, it's weird. It's not that that never happens in life. Like you're standing in an office building, and if I were to just cut out a, basically a roughly sort of 6-foot section around me or whatever, it could very easily be a uniform thing, but that's okay. Some artistic license can be helpful here. Okay. Let's see. Scale 75. Just bought most of the range. Any advice on making the transition from Vallejo GW, specifically airbrushed? Sure. Vallejo thinner, pre-mix, then put it into the cup. Don't try to mix straight scale 75 in the cup. It's very thick. It's a gel medium. You will very easily clog up your airbrush. Over thin to begin with, and then slowly add more paint in. Get yourself a crappy paintbrush that you can mix with. And then just pour from whatever you're mixing into the cup of the airbrush itself. The standard aim for skim milk is true, maybe a little thinner. I use Vallejo airbrush thinner with my scale 75 to airbrush it. It works fine. Yeah, in general, I'd say that's about it. If you over thin, it's easy to add paint in and go. If you under thin and clog your airbrush, congratulations. Now you got to spend like 5 minutes to 10 minutes cleaning the thing out. So there you go. Over is generally a little better. Okay. Let's see. So Alexander followed up on his eyes question earlier with it's often the dark ring that he's struggling with. Yeah. So the answer there is when you paint an eye, you go like the simplest eye painting technique is you paint a whole eye black. You paint a smaller section gray or gray white or ivory or something, some near white, not white being the key. And then you put a black dot in the middle. Like when you put in the second layer of gray, you leave the very slightest outer ring, right? Because my eye has a dark circle around it, right? And so that's the simplest possible method. Black, near white, gray, something like that. Black dot. There you go. Okay. Let's see. Carrion, thank you very much, Carrion. I appreciate that. Those orcs were very fun to paint. Okay. All right, so Otaris 2099. I painted these Shadespire Orcs armor a beautiful, nice yellow, but now I'm scared of weathering it. Please convince me to do the right thing. Sure, happy to. Weather it. Do it. Paint bravely. What's the worst case scenario? I want you to answer that question for me in your head. I can't hear you. But what's the worst? I see this all the time. Paint bravely is my best answer, okay? You cannot ruin something. It is a miniature. It is not international politics. It is not your future. It is not your mortgage or your car. You can't wreck it into the side of a highway. It is a miniature. You have put paint on it. You got yourself there once. You can get yourself there again. This is something that always like, this is a thing, and I get it. I understand. I have the same fear. Okay, we all do. Paint bravely. If you got it to where you're happy once, you will be able to do that again. You can. You can do it. Weathering it, especially in the case of orcs, will make it look better. Be minimal and build from there. Try a little and build it up and get to where you like it. Don't overdo it. If you don't like where it is, just paint over it. Just go back to a neutral, thin neutral tone, and then paint it yellow again. Easy. You can do it. You're not going to be able to see this, but on the side of her head, like where I spent, I don't know, 3 hours on the side of her head on the flesh tone. Okay. And then I wanted to do this like cybernetic tattoo that she has like on the side of her head. It's not going to be visible, but she has like this little cyber tattoo. That was very scary because I was like, well, if I screw this up, I'm going to be in for like 3 hours of blending on the side of her head again. But I could do that. Right? You can get there. You can do it. I believe in you. And moreover, you'll never get there if you don't try it once. But when you try it once and you like it, you'll be able to do it more in the future and you'll be able to do it confidently. Once you lose the fear once, you can do it anytime in the future. But if you painted something you like once, you can paint like that again. There you go. That's my best advice. Okay. All right. I'm currently using Vallejo, but thinking of moving wholesale to Watercolors. Is that a good idea? What should I keep in mind if I do that? I love Watercolors, and no, it's not a good idea. Here's the answer why. You don't need to move wholesale at anything. There's no reason to have brand loyalty with your paint. This is Robert Gardner's question. Use everything. Use everything and anything. Right now in front of me, I am going to read to you in order the paints that are sitting in front of me. Here is a Fantasy and Games from Scale 75, and then a Watercolors, and then a Vallejo Model Air, and then a Vallejo Game Ink, and then another Watercolors. And there's a Reaper down here, and then there's another Scale 75, and then another Vallejo Model. You get the point? Like, I use the paints I like. I have my wall is paints. Admittedly, I have a problem, but I love my paints. And the answer is sometimes the right shade or the right tone or the right whatever happens to be Vallejo. Great. Use that stuff. Now, moving to Watercolors. Yeah, I think Watercolors are fantastic. I love the heck out of them. I love the way that they have their paints arranged. I love the way that they glaze. I love the way that they wet blend. I love the way that they work with loaded brush. I think it's fantastic. So do I enjoy them and use the heck out of them? You bet. But I still keep my other paints around. And when you're working with the gel medium, my easiest answer is use more water than you would have before, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And make sure like use undershading to your advantage, because watercolors are often across the line once you're outside of the base set quite transparent. So make sure you're undershading properly, that you're building up and you know exactly sort of where you're aiming at. That's my best answer. Like, you're not just going to, again, you're not going to be able to go from black to yellow. You never should have done that to begin with, but those kind of like, woo, crazy transitions, that isn't going to work. Okay. So there you go. All right. Hopefully that helps. Caliban 7. I'm painting Thousand Suns Rubric Marines. I'd like to paint the gold first, but I won't be able to varnish the matte surfaces without hindering the shine of the golds afterwards. Suggestions. Why do you want to paint the gold first? I don't know. Like, having painted an entire Tzeentch army that uses that Thousand Suns color scheme of the blue and gold that the Rubric Marines tend to be in. I don't know exactly what you're aiming for. You didn't say blue, but if you're going for like book scheme, it'd be some kind of near blue, turquoise, and gold. Do the matte stuff first. Like, why do you want to do the gold first is my question. Answer that for me, and then I'll answer your other question. Because I've never found a need. I did, I don't know, like 200 plus figs, and I did the gold last. But there could be a reason. I'm not going to discount it. I just want to know what your reason is. Okay. Necronaut Drummer, I watched your basing video and you used some sort of cedar chips for rock. I've been looking and looking for ages here in Alberta. Can you give me a brand or something? Sure. Happy to. So for my rocks, I use this, which is Mosier Lee soil cover for interior house plants. It has French words on it, so it's probably available in other places. Oh, and Spanish words. It says it's great for orchids. So you got that going for you. That's nice. But yeah, this is what I used. It's looks like that. It's pretty great. Makes wonderful rocks. I get it at Home Depot. I don't know. There you go. But that's what I use. Mosier Lee soil cover for interior houseplants. There you are. Hopefully that helps and you can find something. But basically you want indoor plant potting bark. Okay. All righty. Kevin says I never use thinner on actual paint. I usually just use Vallejo Flow Improver. It's very dry here, and thinner makes the paint dry my needle too quickly. Okay, that's fine. I mean, like a Flow Improver is going to effectively do the same thing for you, so that's no issue. Okay. Otaris answered my thing about his yellow, saying his whole life depends on these yellow orcs. He can't screw this up. I promise. It doesn't. You'll be okay. And you won't screw it up because worst case, you just apply a flesh tone over top of all the weathering damage you just did, and then repaint your yellow. You're done. It's 4 orcs. It's 4. I know how many's in the Shadespire Warband. I play that Warband. It's 4 orcs. You can do it. Okay. What Vallejo? Oh, okay. Metal colors do you recommend for normal steel, like swords, spears, etc.? I think steel is very dark, especially when washed. Yeah, the answer is there isn't one. That's the thing. My standard steel, just like steel, I don't want anything special about it. Combination is steel as a base, black ink to get the shade, dark aluminum as a midtone. And then I'd like to vary my highlight depending on what I want, but either white aluminum, silver, or pale burnt metal. Depends on whether or not I want brown in my thing or how strong I want the highlights to be. But every steel weapon to me has those 3 color variations. 4 really when you count the ink. And so yeah, that would be my thing. If you use just one, sure, it's going to look too dark because steel is too dark. It's not actually reflective enough on its own. So you've got to blend between those 3. The other advantage to Vallejo metal colors, obviously, they blend like a dream. So you can glaze with them and all that kind of stuff because of the way the pigment is suspended. So that would be my advice. Okay. To fix metallics after a matte varnish, you can go over them with a satin or gloss varnish by hand. Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Actually, I like if you're going to use something by hand, I do really like the Vallejo metal varnish that comes with the metal color set. It really does a good job of preserving the sheen. But again, I don't varnish my metals, but you can. It's not like I'm not saying this is dictum. I'm saying what I do. Okay. With Zenithal, I think I'm putting on my Zenithal layers too thick. How thick should I be doing the gray and white coats? Pretty thin. Pretty darn thin. Like everything that comes out of your airbrush. Pretty darn thin. And you want to leave dark. Like you shouldn't be aiming. You don't break the angle line. This is a miniature that you're going to see in a tutorial coming later on. This is like a little Zenithal ogre. He actually has the purple undertone I was talking about. So there you go. You can see how that makes him look. And like look at how much shadow is still left there. Right? So that's pretty thin paint that I put on in a pretty controlled fashion. The answer is by going thinner, I can always apply a second coat to get it where I want. If it's too thick, I can't back it out. I can't take paint off. I'm just going to have to repaint something else. And I understand you can strip. That's not what I mean. I mean, I can't targeted take paint off. So always thinner is better. Okay. So Caliban says, the trim on the Rubric Marines is difficult for me to paint after covering the matte surfaces. After they have been painted, there are a lot of nooks that make it difficult. So I want to paint the trim first. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in general, then if you were going to go for something like that, you got a couple different options. You could go for like just a gold spray paint base, like a Retributor armor or something, and then put the blue on top of that. Like that Retributor armor spray paint is going to be pretty tough. You could also airbrush out something like, you know, a Vallejo metal color and go that direction. But if you just do the whole thing in metals and then apply to varnish, like don't do anything else except the metals, and then do a spray varnish like a Vallejo metal varnish or something like that if you want, and then go and do your matte colors, should be fine. One of the tricks is when you're going over metal paint, a lot of matte paints, especially like blues, aren't going to cover really well. So you got to find either a blue with some solid coverage or use a strong covering neutral undertone, like say like a Vallejo extra opaque heavy blue gray would be a great undershade for all those blue parts, and you just pick all those out and then put the blue over top. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Garen Liu, what is your process in planning colors for a competition piece? Research. Lots of research. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of research. I look at a lot of minis before I start, minis that are already the thing I've painted, other things that look kind of like what I painted, art that it looks like the color scheme I'm going for, and then I think about it in general. Sometimes I'll do a value sketch where I'll actually take like a little version of the model and it's just kind of paint it down on a piece of paper. Like I'll just kind of freehand sketch out the shape of the model, and then I'll paint it out on a piece of paper and kind of put the colors where I think they're going to be primarily. Again, it doesn't need to be accurate. Like for a human, it can just be a roughly humanoid shape in the posture that they're in. And then I think about it. But from there, generally, I have a fair conception. But I'm always I'll generally actually kind of change as I go along, because there's usually little choices you make. So I don't always plan everything completely out. Sometimes I'll get to the end and I'll make decisions about this particular gem or this particular belt based on now how the model looks when it's all done. You have to be willing to change. The battle plan's only, the best battle plan doesn't survive contact with the enemy. The best paint scheme doesn't survive contact with the paintbrush, right? Like you're going to see that things look slightly differently as they come out, and you need to be willing to adjust. But hopefully that helps. Okay. Merchant Prince, I want to speed paint some Bad Moon orcs. Okay. I'm thinking of doing a very rusty weathered scheme. Mournfang brown spray to base those. That being the question. Sure. Yeah, you could do that. That would be fine. I mean, you could also, like, if it was me, I would do Mournfang brown with a zenithal of a skeletal bone over it, because then it's going to make your value on your orc's skin a lot easier. Like ivory to brown, especially the very red brown, which is Mournfang. Red is the complementary color to green, and when you put green over red, you get a natural green shadow. Okay. It's the same reason that like canvas painters do a value sketch of people's faces in green before they put on flesh tone, because when the pink reacts with the flesh, it's going to create natural shadows. So you're doing the same thing in reverse. The ivory is the yellow of the white of ivory also acts as a wonderful, nice undertone highlight to green. And then like that over like their brown clothes, if you've got like brown leather and tabards and pants, sure, a couple washes over top of an ivory brown zenithal, and boom, you are in Happy Town for doing, leathers. Like that's a gimme on a speed paint. And your metals are just going to get covered over anyways. Your rusted stuff, you can, like the little bit of ivory that might hit on some of the very rusty stuff would actually be a great base to lay some orange and stuff like that over when you do weathering stippling. So yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts. Okay. Do I have a favorite brand of primer? Yes. Just Vallejo. I use the same. The only primer I tend to use 95% of the time is this right here. Vallejo Surface Primer, German Panzer Gray. Everything else I use is paint over the top. This is the only actual primer I use. Now, with one notable exception, that if I ever need to use bone primer for any reason, I do love this. I do love the Stynylrez. This is like a bone colored primer. I really like this stuff too. I've tried a couple different colors, the Stynylrez. I mean, I like it. It's nothing wrong with it. I know a lot of people speak highly of them, and they seem really nice. So, but the Vallejo German Panzer Gray is exactly what I want out of primer. It is more or less the only thing I prime in. Okay. Did I get a new airbrush? Yes. I have a couple new airbrushes. I got a couple of different Grex airbrushes. Specifically, like this is one of them. This is the Grex XG2. It's very nice. I like it. Little things I like it has a little magnetic tip, or tip protector, I should say. The cup screws off very easily. Right, stuff like that, so you can really easily access down in the thing. Little things I like. Trigger action's really nice. So yeah, I have a couple different Grexes I've been playing around with. I didn't get the like gun Grexes because I don't like those. Okay. Let's see. Red Wizard. Sometimes when I use the GW washes on a large area, I get a really glossy look. Any tips to prevent this and or to fix it if it happens? Sure. So 2 tips. 1, don't put GW shade over a really large flat area. Those aren't meant to be washed. That would be tip number 1. Large areas aren't meant to be washed. Washes are meant to pick out recessed detail, not large flat spaces. You are inviting coffee staining when you do that. So there's tip number 1. Just don't. I went to the doctor and I said, doctor, it hurts when I go like this. He said, don't go like this. Now, here's tip number 2. You're getting gloss in your shade because the pigment has separated from the medium. This is effectively a very medium heavy suspension because of the nature of what it is. And it's very easy for it to separate. It means you didn't shake it enough before you decided to put it on the miniature. And what you put on the miniature had a much higher medium content than it did pigment. And hence it glossed in the same way I described earlier. So if you're going to have a shade that you haven't touched in a while, then you really want to make sure you give it a good shake. Like really, really, really give it a good shake. Something that is a non-ferrous agitator, glass beads and stuff like that. Again, Warcolors makes some really nice agitator balls that will, aren't going to rust or anything. Can be great to put inside these just to really get them mixed up. There you go. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Let's see. One other question for me, if you know offhand, what are the racks with your paint called or what company makes them? Amazon will have them. Just need to know what to look for specifically. I literally have no idea, man. I think I have 3 different ones. Like literally for my stand-up paint racks on the walls, I have 3 different ones. For these nail polish ones over here, they're just search nail polish rack on Amazon. I don't know what to tell you. That's my best answer. And pick the acrylic, relatively cheap ones. I couldn't tell you beyond that. Like if you ask the question in the comments afterward, I'll see if I can hunt up like in the actual comments of this video. I'll see if I can hunt up what I did buy and I'll give you a link. Is that fair? Like I'll actually go search out on Amazon because I couldn't tell you brand name off the top of my head. Okay. Oh yeah, so one of the other things was yes, if you use water alone to thin your shades, yeah. So just using like some glazed medium or something can also be another way to work with a shade to get it flowing better without having that happen as easily. Okay. Let's see. All right, where are we at? Does IKEA have any nice glass display cases for minis? Yeah, I think so. These are IKEA. I couldn't tell you, like, I don't know. I don't know what the names are. Regisor or Fabricor or something. I don't know. But I like these. I have 3 of each of these in the room here, as well as one big one. They have a really nice, big, like, very, very tall one I have over here on this wall that runs up to the ceiling. So, yeah, I love them. I think they're good. Relatively easy to assemble. I mean, relatively. All things with IKEA are somewhat subjective when it comes to the assembling, but I mean, you can't beat the price. So there you go. All right. Let's see. We still got about 14 minutes or so. So if we want to put some more questions up, I think I burnt through everything that was in here. Wow. I think I caught up. That's amazing. All right. So put some more questions in there, folks, and let's see if we can get through them. Okay. I'm going to pause while we're waiting on some questions to take a small drink here because I've been talking for like 45 minutes straight. So one moment. There we go. Okay. How many Zangors are too many Zangors? I don't know. Probably more than like 60 is too many, right? Like those guys are kind of annoying to paint, to be completely honest. So like regular Zangors, probably 60. Now if we're talking about like Skyfires, more than 6. Not rules wise, just paint wise. They're unbelievably annoying. Okay. So yes, Carrion said, all right, well, what about that Damascus metal effect? Yeah, that's a tough one, man. I think my answer to you, because the thing with this Damascus steel that I'm looking at is that it is a very, I want to say almost regular pattern, like this marbleized pattern. It's random, of course. There's lots of different variations on it. But in almost all these cases, it has a very like regular nature to it. And it's these sort of like very discrete lines and patterns that go throughout. It almost looks like the like how I would describe it is the knotting of wood, right? It looks like wood, like when you slice a tree and then varnish it. Like that's what it looks like. I think the answer is if you really want to get the full effect, I've got to say, I haven't come up with any other clever cheat. I noticed lots of different variations on it. Like some are just straight lines, some are little circles. It's like some is more marbly, some is more dots, and like there's lots of different variations on it when I looked across it. And at least in a Google image search I did there. I mean, I'm gonna say that it's also very sharp, by the way, which is what's interesting about it. And the lines didn't seem like they crossed each other very much. Like it seemed swirly, twirly like ice cream, but the lines were clean. Whereas marble, the cracks and things tend to go all over the top of each other. But yeah, I think the answer is you freehand that. And I think the answer is I'd probably do it in a dark steel, and then I'd get a good flowing lighter color and start tracing concentric rings. I'll give it a shot sometime and see if I can do anything that I like, but boy, is that a challenging one. I will openly admit I had never seen a weapon that looked like that. I don't know how I've ever missed that. I was certainly familiar with Damascus steel, like as per what it is. But I've never seen it. So that's neat. You have presented me with a heck of a challenge, buddy. So I'll see what I can do. Okay. Let's see. Do you have a dust extraction for your airbrush? Oh, like a hood? Yeah. Yeah, I have a little vent. I don't have it going anywhere. I mean, I just have a filter and I just have a filter and I change the filter every so often. I don't have it like vented out of the room or anything, so just I wear a mask. I have a vent. It's acrylic paint. And I run it like, especially anytime I do primer or anything like that, everything's on, mask is on, the whole deal. Oh boy, Paul Conti, what's the worst hobby advice you ever received and followed to learn a better way later? God, I don't know. That's tough. The worst hobby advice I ever received, that there was a right way to do anything. That is to say, there are ways that are better, and there are ways that are faster, and there are ways that achieve different effects. But saying there is one right way to do one hobby-related thing is usually wrong. There are usually multiple roads. That doesn't mean everything is equally valid. Okay, that doesn't mean every technique is equally valid. There's a difference between no one right way and everything is fine. There is a shade in between there. But in general, there are lots of different roads you can take to achieve various effects. And if one person is doing something and that's the way they found to succeed in it, but then you find somebody who's doing something completely different, try both and see which one you like better. Because your own particular style may be more suited to one than the other. Okay. Gwendar, new to painting. Thin paints using my Masterson wet palette. Awesome. With a drop of water from brush being dipped in water glass. Yep. A lot of the time, the paint still seems bumpy. Too much paint, primed when cold. Yeah, I mean, well, break down to what's going on here. Like, you need to do a little detective work to figure out what's going on. That is to say, is it your primer? Like, did you use spray paint primer? That's going to possibly have some bumps, especially if there wasn't the exact right humidity. But what I would do is over your primer layer, take a wash and run it over the top and see how even it distributes. Like, if it just smoothly drags over and leaves not very little behind, then you've got a flat prime. If you see little bits of it starting to get caught, then you probably have like micro bumps in the primer, and that's getting picked out and being sort of made writ larger as you start applying more paint and washing and stuff like that. My basic advice with the wet palette is don't be afraid to sort of like have your drop on the wet palette and then just thin it over another area. I'll probably do a hobby cheating on just working. I have it on my list to just working with your wet palette and ways to do it. But don't be afraid to over thin in a separate area. So like what I usually do is I'll have like a drop of my color and then I grab a dab, put it up here, and then start thinning it out here and pushing it in. Then if I get it too thin, I can grab a new little tip of paint and mix it in there until I get the exact right consistency I want. But I haven't diluted or altered my original little dollop of paint I've put on the wet palette. So, like I said, I'll probably do a tutorial on this soon. Maybe I'll throw that up very quickly. That would be an actual quick one to do that would be, I think, really informative. So maybe I'll just record that one very fast. Okay. Yeah, so Red Wizard says, I love the Vallejo metal colors. Any tips on mixing the gold and copper to get different colors? Hopefully they come out with more golds. Yes. I love the color you get out of a 3-to-2 copper to gold ratio with 1 drop of pale burnt metal. So 3-2-1 copper, gold, pale burnt metal. You get a wonderful, like, rich gold tone. And that's just the thing. Like, don't be afraid to mix the silvers in to then again further sort of whiten out your colors. Also, don't be afraid to mix in some like scale 75 intensity inks in to go the other direction to get some darker or more interesting effects. I've mixed in some of the sepias and intense woods and intense chestnuts and stuff to really get a really deep, rich sort of brown gold, and I've liked that too. So there you go. Okay. How do you know the right amount of water in the sponge in your wet palette? Mine is either soaked or dry. I just continually add water. My answer is I get it to where the water is kind of sitting there on the side, but not on the paper. Just it's wet and moist, and the water's kind of there on the side. And I keep a little bottle like this next to me. And like, because I'll sit here with my wet palette open for 12 hours. So a lot of water is going to evaporate, especially this time of year when everything is dry. And I just kind of re-wet it. I test near the sides, make sure it's moist. I mean, the answer is if your paints are getting tacky or dry, it's not wet enough. So re-wet it. It's kind of a trial and error thing, man. I wish I had like a magic ratio to tell you, but I don't. I just usually keep water next to me in that little spray bottle and constantly like drop some more water in to keep it fresh. Okay. Do I have a favorite paint color? Something you thought was, wow, this is the most unique color I've ever seen, and try to use it often. Oh yeah, man, I've got a lot. Boy, oh boy, where to to even begin. Like in general, I like teal turquoise. I have been called the tyrant of teal because I use it so often. And I agree with that appraisal. I love that color. I like turquoise in general. To that end, scale 75 Despair Green is one of my favorite colors of all time. Scale 75 Bloodfest Crimson is an amazing color. I love using that for a lot of my reds. Whole Red from Vallejo Model Air is just an incredibly useful shadow color. It's a deep, dark red that works wonderful for a ton of different uses. The turquoise, like number 3, and the purple number 3 from War Colors are both wonderful colors. Like it's purple 3 is sort of a very rich, saturated pink that I really enjoy. And the turquoise 3 is exactly in my sweet spot of where I like it to be. War Colors Fluorescent Pink is one of my favorite things. It was one of the inspirations to do this Necromunda scheme. What else do I really love? Reaper Ashen Brown. This is one of my favorite weird colors. It's a very gray brown. It's in the HD paint series. This is a wonderful sort of base tone for kind of more interesting or unusual flesh tone colors, as well as good dead wood, stuff like that. I really like that one. Reaper Vampiric Shadow is also really nice. What else? Oh, Plasma Fluid from Ghost Tints is maybe one of my favorite paints of all time. Their Badger Minotaurs, that's Badger Minotaur Ghost Tint. Plasma Fluid, I also love their Troll Hide. Vallejo has a line of sort of cement type colors like white gray and cement gray and that kind of stuff. I really like those. Vallejo Model Air Duck Egg Green. Wonderful near white. It's just very interesting because it has a slight green tone to it. Yeah, there you go. These are a few of my favorite things. Okay. Let's see. Oh, nice. Bjarni had Scala Gladiatoria channel has some videos if you're interested in Damascus steel. Cool. I'll check it out, man. Very nice. Okay. Do you have any tips for doing really dark leather? Like, are you doing the same method as black leather or worn leather with glazes washes? Yes, I do the same thing for very dark leather. I just shift my colors down. Like it's all just dark browns and blacks or reds, purples worked in there, that kind of thing. Leather is pretty fluid. It can be anything in any brown with red and purple mixed in and creams and whites. Like I go nuts with leather because there's no reason not to. Leather's more about the texture of having things like the scratches and the dents and the texture to it than it is about any particular color. Leather can come in a wide variety of colors. But yeah, I just mix in like one of my favorite things for very dark leather is Scale 75 Fantasy and Games Arbuckle's Brown. To mix that in with a little black, I think that makes a wonderful deep red brown leather, red brown black leather. So there you go. But yeah, same trick. Still just like undershading, hashes, dots, stipples, washes over and over again. Same technique, just like the video. Okay. Let's see. Any tips for painting black power armor without going crazy on edge highlight or making it look gray? That requires a whole video. True black is one of the toughest things to paint because the world doesn't actually reflect true black much. That sounds strange. I would like you to stop right now. Let's all look at me on screen right now. Look at this. This is black. How much of this is actually black? This is a glossy black, right? So is the power armor gloss? Look at this whole side. Really look at it. Look at how much yellow is being reflected off of the walls. Look at this bright spot right here where it's catching the light. Look at this front side. Look at the blue that's being caught off the blue fluorescence above. Same here where the reflected color is happening. Right? These are black. This is black leather. Look at how broad the highlights are on this piece of foam. Look at how little of this is actually black. Look at my chair, which is like this faux leather crap. That's all black. Like this says black. I go to the website, order this thing, it said black. It's black. how much of that is actually black? Look at the soft blue tones that are coming up in the fade, and then the light, and then the area of light right here. Painting black like true black requires the use of a secondary color to fade you into a near white or a gray or something like that. Like if you look at the highlights here, this is a near white gray. And then it slowly recesses as it goes down my head and falls into complete shadow here. It's tricky, man. The answer is a lot of glazing. It's one of my least favorite things to paint. Unfortunately, the real simple answer with a lot of armor, especially when it comes to Space Marines, is just do the edge highlighting. It's a cheat. It's not realistic, but it can be artistically eye-catching and make them go. Beyond that, the airbrush can be your friend because you can do some very subtle glazes into gray, blue-gray, something like that to really catch minor things and then do some very tight points of light. But it isn't easy. I wish I told you there was a complete easy trick for it, but it isn't. Black is one of the hardest colors to paint and have it look realistic. If you just want to paint the color black, that's simple. But painting the color black and having it look actually like anything that is black in the real world is tougher. Okay. Oh, Merchant Prince said, I wonder if you could set up a bottle with a dripper thing to continually wet the palette. It's a good idea. I bet you could. Okay. What is my most elaborate conversion? Well, one of them is right there. The Archaon I did that turned him into dragons. But undoubtedly the most elaborate is that guy right there. I think probably. Mr. War Chicken, my recent Iron Jaws, like where I turned the Maw Crusher into a giant chicken. I mean, there's some other ones. Like I built my Nagash completely from scratch. So he's just like a cobbled together of 16 different models. I have a double Screaming Bell that's like 2 Screaming Bells put together. I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of different conversions. My Celestin Prime, all those kind of things. I like to do every so often, like at least once a year, I want to do a big, elaborate, crazy conversion. I love them. I've got one planned out for next year already. So, but yeah, either like Tzeentch, the chicken, the Maw Chicken, or Nagash would probably be the 3, because those are just like started hacking at giant models and putting stuff on and seeing how it worked. Love a hobby cheating with your favorite technicals like Liquitex, Flowade, and how to use them. That's a good idea. Okay. All right. It pretty much brings us to time. We're at our hour. I apologize. I don't have a lot more. I do have to get on the road today, and I've got a couple of the things I need to wrap up. If there's 1 or 2 final quick questions, post them now. I will give you 1 minute to post those questions. Have I ever used the technical paints from AK or MIG, like their filters? It seems like they have 1,000 new types of paint for me, but I don't know. Yes, I have. Yes, they're good, especially when it gets to any of the enamel-based stuff. It's very different. They are very useful. I would recommend you watch, especially a lot of the historical tutorials on it, where they use a lot of those filters and enamels and things like that in a very different way. They are cool. James Wapple also has a blog series on using some of the weathering stuff from ammo and from MIG and AK. And he uses a lot of them. They are great. You probably don't need anything like the whole range. It'd be more like find a couple that you like that are useful and go from there. Okay. All right. There we go. Thank you very much, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to all of you who watched. Thank you for all the great questions. I hope this was helpful. I want to start trying to do these more often. It's just a matter of getting the time set aside to do it. I want to start announcing them in advance. One thing I will promise is that from now on, whenever I do them, I will announce these at least 24 hours in advance. I'll shout them out on my Twitter and post them up on Facebook and stuff like that. So if you're following me at Warhammer Weekly on Twitter, you can see when these get announced. And hopefully you can come in and ask your questions. I hope this was helpful. Again, please don't take anything I say as Bible truth. I'm only here to give you ideas and the ways I would solve problems. In the end, we all are on our own hobby journey and have to find our style and our answers individually. I only hope I can help you take the next step. That's always the goal. But thank you very much. Happy holidays, everybody. And I will see you next time. Oh, I will answer one quick thing. Adam Bow said, can you list the essential stuff to buy for your first airbrush experience? Adam, ask that question down in the comments. I have a video with links to everything. I will link you to that video in the comments. Okay. There you go. Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a wonderful, happy New Year if I don't see you before then. But otherwise, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.